Good morning. We will wait just about a few seconds here. Let our participants join. Great. Okay. I'll look for any signs from my support team here. Make sure we're recording and good to go, but we'll just go ahead and get started. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. I am Cher Havens. I'm the Deputy Executive Director and Chief Communications Officer for the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, which houses Colorado's new Paid Family and Medical Leave Division. So we're so happy to have you here today for our webinar right up to the deadline of premium payments. So that's what we'll focus on today. We'll also provide a little summary on what we have going with private plan options for our employers, and of course, leave plenty of time for your questions. Joining me today, we have a panel of experts here to answer all of your questions about our new paid family leave program for the state. We have David Gallivan. He is the Compliance and Appeals Branch Manager for the Paid Family Division, and a whole host of other experts, Evan Grimes in our policy shop, and some of our customer service and communications and technology support folks. So plenty of folks here to answer your questions. We'll do our best to get to all of your questions today. We can send answers via follow-up if we don't get to all of the questions. Please use the Q&A feature on the Zoom to submit your questions throughout today's webinar. And also a recording of the webinar will be available on our website at family.colorado.gov. We'll also share it out with everyone who's registered today. So with that, we will just go ahead and get started. So here's a look at our agenda. We'll go over submitting wage and premiums for Q1. We'll check in on where we are with implementing the family program. We'll share some new information for healthcare providers. We'll talk again a bit about private plans and what that marketplace looks like. And we'll take a look at how family interacts with other benefits, and of course, get to all of your questions. Okay, so let's talk about where we are with family. You've heard, I hope, that it's time for employers to meet their obligations under the voter-approved ballot initiative. Employers with at least one employee need to register and submit wage reports and premiums for Q1 of 2023. Now, if you're familiar with our unemployment insurance division, which you likely are, family is structured similar to UI in that you are submitting to the department wage reports and premiums on a quarterly cadence. Now, this will be done, as I said, quarterly. The deadline for Q1 was actually April, but because it's a new program, we've just extended that till May 31st, which is next Wednesday. So keep in mind, you may know, but even an employer with one employee must register and submit the 0.45% of the employee's wages. Again, we've offered a grace period for these wages, wage reports and premiums. So that's next Wednesday, the 31st. We have some guidance and information on our website, including how-to video guides. We've also offered 2 new features to the My Family Plus Employer portal. Users can now edit wages for the current reporting quarter and amend wages and reports for previous reporting quarters. And then lastly, we've also added the functionality to change the status of your business. So think about closures or mergers, successor relationships. Those items that amend the status of your account can be done in the portal as well. Okay, so as I mentioned, we are just a few days away from the May 31st grace period for filing your wage reports and premiums. Here's just a quick look at where we are with implementing family. So again, wage reports and premiums are due on a quarterly basis. Looking ahead to August, and we'll talk about this in a second, we are launching a new healthcare provider portal. This will allow healthcare providers the ability to interact with the family program on behalf of their patients. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then again, leading up to January 1, 2024, with the beginning of benefit payments to claimants in the system. Okay, so as I mentioned, healthcare providers now will have the opportunity in August to register with our healthcare provider portal. This is unique to Colorado's paid family leave program, but we believe it will provide a value add to our healthcare provider community on behalf of their patients. Now, although we don't expect to have a lot of activity with regard to folks getting into the system who anticipate using paid family leave, they certainly will be planning to file for benefits in 2024. So healthcare providers can register within the portal, and patients who do believe they will be utilizing paid family leave can begin applying for the leave actually later this year. So what does this provide a healthcare provider with? Well, reduction in paperwork when patients ask you to verify a serious health condition, improve the patient experience, protect healthcare records and credentials by reducing the potential for fraud, and allow you to view all documents in one convenient place. We are looking for healthcare providers to help us test this portal, and the team will share more information in the chat on how to actually help us get in early access to the system, test the system, and give us feedback on your experience as a user. With that, I'm going to turn it over to David to talk about the private plan marketplace.
All right, yeah, so the private plan marketplace is open. It's really exciting news if you're looking for a private option to fulfill your family obligations. We have 2 private insurance plans right now that have been approved by our friends over at the Department of Insurance. We have 15 more companies that have submitted their plans. So keep an eye on that private plan page to see more plans come in. It is a marketplace. You have a choice of providers. And I always say when we're talking about this, one of those choices is the state-run family program, which could be advantageous for a lot of employers. So look carefully and make the right decision for your employer. And don't forget that even if you are planning on using a private option, and that's either one of these private plans from a third-party insurer or self-insurance, you still have to register with us and you have to pay premiums until you are approved to operate under that private option. All of those directions are on our private plan page. You should also check out our new employer guide to private plans. We have some information on this on the next slide. It's got a checklist of items that you'll need to have handy when you apply for the private plan approval. We've also got all the forms and templates that you'll need if you want to self-insure, and all the details about what to tell your employees, because you do have to give them notice. You can find it on our private plans page, and it'll be in the link when you get these slides after today's webinar. We have some more exciting news to share today. Benefits are going up, kind of. Let me explain. If we had benefits now in 2023, the benefits that people would be getting in 2024 would be higher. So all of our benefits are based on the state average weekly wage. So we look at all of the wages that are paid in the state of Colorado and we average it out. And that is what determines what your family benefits are. So up until now, we've been using last year's average weekly wage, but that gets updated every July. We've just done the math. And what we know is that starting July 1st, the state's average weekly wage, the benchmark for all of this, will be $1,421.16. That's a $70 increase. And so the effect of that is going to depend on somebody's wages when they apply for benefits, because we do have a sliding scale. But it means that the benefits that will be available in 2024 are higher than what we've been reporting on our website. And we didn't know how much higher until May, until this month. But now we know those numbers are going to be out there, but premiums aren't going up. Premiums are still going to be that 0.45% of wages for those participating employees, and overall 0.9% in those cases where the employer has to contribute as well. So this is exciting news. We're going to update the benefit calculator on our website. And this is something that's going to happen every year. Every year around this time, we're going to get those new numbers for the state average weekly wage. We're going to calculate them. In the past 20 years, I think it's gone down once. We're normally pretty reliant on that number increasing every year. And so that's kind of how we adjust our benefits for inflation. Now, let's also take a look with that at some of the other types of leaves. So this is what we call our coordination of benefits. So how do family benefits interact with those other types of leave? Let's start with short-term and long-term disability. So these are if your employer offers some sort of short-term or long-term disability plan, some benefits out there that are paid. The employer can count both the wage replacement amount and the duration of the family leave towards the limits included in the short-term or long-term disability policies. So we're not going to reduce your family benefits at all. Everybody, your benefits are set by law. You get the benefits you're entitled to from us, but an employer can take a credit against those for the short-term or long-term disability. And that's also a little bit up to the short-term or long-term disability plans. If your employer, talk with the person, with the company that offers your plan about how to handle that. But important to note, employers do have to give written notice to employees that they're going to do this. Another question we get a lot, how is family benefit going to interact with workers' compensation? So these are both cases where you might have somebody who has some sort of a serious health condition, like an injury, and who are going to be receiving benefits, some wage replacement for it. Family benefits and workers' comp benefits can't be taken at the same time for the same reason, for the same absence. So if you're hurt at work, you get workers' comp, not family. If you're not hurt at work, you have a serious health condition that didn't come from the workplace, then you can get family. If someone's absent from work because of a work-related injury or illness, they cannot claim family benefits. If they're still working after the injury or illness and need to take leave for an unrelated qualifying issue, then you get family benefits. So let's say you're hurt at work, you're getting medical treatment through workers' comp, but you're still working, and then you need some leave to take care of a family member with a serious health condition. Then you can get those family benefits. But if you're off work because of a work-related injury, that's comp, not family. Any condition that's compensable under the workers' comp umbrella is not eligible for family benefits. When you apply for benefits, you have to disclose that. Healthcare providers have to give us that information. And if you get family benefits for something that should have been work comp, that's an overpayment, and we're going to be looking to collect that money back. There's another program out there that sometimes interacts with family, and that's the FMLA. So FAMLI is Colorado's Paid Family and Medical Leave Insurance. FMLA is the Federal Family Medical Leave Act. There are some big differences. FMLA is a federal law that covers large employers. FAMLI is a state law that covers all employers in the state of Colorado, with the exception of some local governments. Under FMLA, workers of companies with 50 plus employees can take 12 weeks of, here's the big difference, unpaid leave for certain life events. And a worker's eligibility is determined by the employer. In Colorado, under FAMLI, employers of any size are covered under this program. So all workers have that job protection. And the leave is paid. So FMLA is paid leave, FAMLI is paid leave, FMLA is unpaid, really just the job protection. FAMLI applies to businesses of any size, and self-employed workers are also eligible to opt into the FAMLI program. FMLA doesn't really apply to self-employed workers because we generally assume you're not going to fire yourself for getting sick. So you don't necessarily need the FMLA protection, but you can and should consider opting into participation in the FAMLI program because it does offer that additional paid leave and that safety net. One more piece of housekeeping before we get to your questions. This is very important information. We really prefer premiums be paid via the online portal through those options that we have available there. But I know some people, you still love those paper checks. That's a-okay, it's fine, but you got to mail them to the right address. The P.O. box on your screen, P.O. Box 5070, Denver, Colorado 80218, that is the address to send your checks to. If you send them to another address, they may get to us, they may not. There will be a delay. And right now, we're very forgiving. We've got grace periods, but we could well be in a situation in the future where if that check is sent to a wrong address and it doesn't make it into the account by the due date, you're going to face late fees because it was mailed to the wrong address. So please, if you are mailing paper checks, make sure you are using this address. We don't want to be writing penalties just because of a mailing mistake. So this is the address to use, but also, again, we do really like those electronic payments. And now let me hand it back over to Cher.
Thank you, David. So we want to hear from you. We want to, in addition to this forum of a webinar, we also have virtual town halls. You can follow us on social media, contact our customer service center. We certainly want to be available as a resource for you. We realize this is a brand new regulatory requirement for employers. And so we want to do all that we can to help you navigate the system and remain in compliance. But speaking of compliance, before we get to questions, David, I did want to just have you touch briefly on, since we are a week away or less from the extended wage report and premium deadline, what are the penalties for an employer who does not meet those filing and premium payment periods? Can you just step through that briefly, and then we'll get to the questions?
So the penalties are $50 per employee, but that's just the penalty. There's also going to be interest and late fees. So the longer you wait, the more expensive it gets. So, we don't want to put a huge financial burden on somebody who's late with this, but we do need that information. And if you don't file that report timely and you don't pay premiums, and those can be separate penalties there for late report and late payment, you are going to be seeing those per employee penalties along with interest at the statutory rate, which is over 8%, and some additional late fees in there potentially as well.
And as David said, we really want to help you comply. We want to provide you with education and information to ensure that you're meeting those filing periods. Like all of our regulatory divisions, we prefer compliance through education. And so if you have any questions, need any support or resources, we want to be here to assist you and ensure that compliance, because again, we realize this is a brand new regulatory requirement for our employers in the state. So with that, I am going to turn it over to our moderator, Jessica, and we can just go ahead and dive into some of these questions we have coming in.
Thanks, Cher. I'm going to start with a question here from Elaine. She's asking, if we are a union contractor, do we just need to register as our employees are covered by the union benefits? David, can you take that question?
I'm actually wondering if Evan might be able to weigh in on that one with a little bit more detail and accuracy than I could.
Yeah, no problem. The short answer basically is that there aren't any exceptions under FAMLI with regard to employers or employees and their relationship to unions. So if you're an employee that's covered by a collective bargaining agreement, that doesn't impact whether or not you're eligible for family benefits. You are if you meet the requirements otherwise. Same with union employers. If you offer some sort of a plan under that collective bargaining agreement, you still have to register and you're still obligated to pay premiums and otherwise participate just like any other employer in the state. You may be able to count an individual's family usage against some of those benefits, so long as those benefits are only for a reason covered by the family program. We've got that described a little bit more in detail in our coordination of benefits rules. But long story short, for the most part, union status doesn't impact family coverage or family obligations.
Thanks, Evan. I'm going to take Spencer Davis's question next and hand that off to David. He's asking, for employers that allow their employees to supplement the difference between the family paid wage benefit and their regular wages using their own accrued time off, is the division going to provide an automatic weekly report or other means of communications to inform employers of the wages paid out to the employees by family so that we know how to calculate that top off?
Yeah, and so we are going to be communicating with employers. So there's a couple of different scenarios here. The easiest one to deal with is a situation where somebody is taking complete leave. They are just completely out of work for that period of time. And you will just then find out at the beginning of the claim, here is what the approved leave is. So we will tell you, this employee has been approved for 6 weeks of family leave beginning on X date. And then you'll know that the 6 weeks from that date are dates that they're not going to be working. and you can calculate based on that. With the more kind of intermittent leave or recurring leave, where somebody might be taking periods of time, we're going to tell you what they're approved for, but it'll be a little bit more on the employer to know when is that person working, when are they not working. We're going to have that employee reporting to us when they're taking that leave, so that we can pay them the appropriate amount of benefits. But you're going to need to know too just what hours are working, and we'll tell you what the benefit. I believe we're going to be communicating the benefit amount there in a way that will let you know what the additional amount is. But you can also use the benefit calculator. If you know what you pay somebody, you can pop that in. You'll find out what their benefits are, and then you can from there calculate whatever top off you're going to be providing. Jessica, you're still on mute.
So sorry, David, I'm going to hand this next question over to you as well. It's about being free from control. Eric is asking a follow-up from a question that he's already asked and has been answered via chat, but I'm assuming he's asking for clarification on what it means to be free from control and whether or not he is counted as an employee or others on his team should be counted as an employee. So can you explain what free from control means?
We got half an hour left, right? So I can start. Eric, you're not alone. The difference between an employee and a non-employee is it's somewhat ambiguous. And there's a reason for that. It's because if we draw too bright of a line, we're going to put people on the wrong side of it. So the first thing to know about this is it's very fact specific. We look at the details of what somebody is actually doing and how they're doing it. And so we have that little bit of ambiguity there to make sure that any determinations that are made here are just and are accurate. But in a general sense, what free from control means is, do you have a boss or do you not have a boss? Is there somebody who is telling you how to do your job? Or are you making those fully independent decisions about how to do it? So today I'm here because my boss told me to be here. My boss has given me very specific requirements about what my job is, and that's what I do. But you think about this like if you have somebody come out and work on your house, if you call a plumber to come fix a leak, right? Hopefully, I say this on behalf of all of the plumbers I know, you're not standing over that person's shoulder telling them how to do the plumbing, right? You say, hey, plumber, here's a leak. That person comes in, they use their own knowledge. They know what they're supposed to do from you. They're supposed to fix the leak, but they're going to go about that in the way that they decide, completely free and independently from control. So really, in the broadest sense, if you have a boss, you're not free from control. If you are the boss, or you are self-employed and you don't have a boss, then you're free from control. So if somebody is telling you how to do your job, you're not free from control. If you are deciding how to do it, it's more likely that you are.
Thank you, David. Our next question is from Christine about private plans. If we move to a private plan by October, what do we have to do with the premiums that employees have paid from January through October 2023? I understand that they will be, sorry, my screen just popped up. Will reimbursed by the employer. Do I have to get it back to the employee, or can we use the money for our bond to give to the private provider? David, can you take that one?
Yeah, Christine, there are two things you can do with that money, and you listed them both there in your question. So number one, give it back to your employees. Number two, use it to initiate that private plan by agreement with the private plan provider. So that's it. It has to, if it's not going back to the employees, it has to be a part of obtaining that replacement private plan coverage.
Thanks,
David,
David.
let me just pipe in for one little bit of clarity too. That's certainly right, but to be able to withhold them for a private plan, that has to be under the terms of your approved private plan. If that's not under the terms of your approved private plan, then you're going to have to refund those to your employees.
That's a great point. Make sure it's a part of the contract you have with the private plan employer.
Thank you, David and Evan. My next question, I'm going to hand over to Ann Dooley on the call. Ann, Jasmine is asking, how would we as the employer know exactly what dollar amount is due for us? And do we have to speak to each of our employees individually to collect the information needed to pay those premiums? So Ann, if you could take that first half of that question and we can hand the second one off to David.
Oh, sure. Thanks. So the premiums are based on the subject wages of your given employees. At the time, if you're submitting through the portal and you're not working through a payroll provider, the system will actually provide what premiums due amount is needed by you as the employer through the portal. So once you go ahead and submit each employee's quarterly wages for those Colorado workers, an output of the system will be in the email. You'll receive an email what that actual premiums amount is based on what you have registered your company as, whether it's 9 or fewer or 10 plus. That'll determine if the calculator runs at a 0.9 or a 0.45 premiums amount.
Thanks, Ann. And David, can you offer a little bit more clarity into the requirement to notify employees of the deduction?
Yeah, so we've had this requirement in place for some time actually to let employees know that family was coming, that they are going to be seeing these deductions. We have a lot of great resources available to assist you with that. We have a pay stub stuffer to go in with paychecks. We have postings, we have notices that you can give out. But really the bottom line is there should be something noted on the pay stub of this is a deduction for family and shows how much you're deducting.
Thank you, David. We have an anonymous question here. Can government employees opt out if our employer has opted out? I think they mean opt in if their employer has opted out.
Well,
David?
let's answer both of them.
Yeah.
Right. So local governments have the ability to opt out of participation in family. So that's cities, towns, school districts, special districts, school boards, etc. They have the ability to say, we're not going to participate in family. And so if they have done that, and you should know, because if you work for one of those local governments, they were supposed to tell you that they've opted out. If you work for one of those local governments and you don't want to participate in family, you don't have to do anything. You're already out. We're going to have some guidance as the year goes on for those local government employees who want to opt in. And then you're going to be registering and paying premiums and participating in the family program, just like any other employee, but that's your choice. So if you don't want to participate and you work for an opted out local government, you don't have to do anything. If you want to opt in, you do have to raise your hand and say, yes, I'd like to be part of this.
Thanks, David. I'm going to hand over a new question to Ann. We got this question in from one of our email inboxes. They are asking if, as a business owner who has already signed up because they thought that they had to and were required to, how do they opt out if they truly are qualify as a self-employed individual?
Thanks, Jessica. Certainly, as I make an assumption that you have a login to my Family Plus Employer portal as a business owner or account representative of that account, you should be able to go ahead and log in. And as of, I think, late March, we added additional feature for this scenario. Heaven forbid your business closes or you actually don't have any Colorado workers. Maybe you get bought out. For some reason, your account participation status needs to change with family. There is a feature in the portal once you log in from the dashboard. I believe it's on the right-hand side. That's called account participation status, and you can go through that process to request to have your account changed. For some reason, if that doesn't work out, we also have a lovely contact center at 1-866-CO-FAMLI that you can contact, and they can help you walk through that as well. But you should be able to complete all those steps in the portal on your own. Jessica, you're on mute still.
Sorry, guys. Thank you, Ann. I'm going to hand this next question over to Evan. This one's about unions as well. We are a union local that reimburses employer wages when working for the union. We have officers, president, EVP, VP, etc. Less than 9 employees that we may pay at any given time. Do all have to pay the 0.45% and the local pay the 0.45%? I was told the officers can opt out. Their main wages come from their employer.
There's a whole lot in that question, and I'm afraid that I can't answer precisely. So if that person wants to submit an email with some more detail, I think that would be the best avenue for me to give a responsive and helpful answer.
Thank you, Evan. We'll take this one from Natalie about FMLA. If we require FMLA to be taken consecutively for bonding, does that also apply to family? David, can you take that?
Yeah, so kind of works a couple different ways here, depending at the direction you're looking at it. Basically, there's no restrictions on family. So if somebody comes in and says, I'm taking bonding leave, I need 12 weeks because I've got a new child, that's a claim that's probably going to be approved by us. They're going to get that 12 weeks. What you want to do is get them signed up on that FMLA to move at the same time. So it's kind of on the employer to make sure that that FMLA is being accessed and used consecutively. So what our act says is that family and FMLA leave can run consecutively, but it's kind of on the employer to get that FMLA started up so that that can happen. Because if you don't do that, what you can have is a situation where somebody's going to come in, they're going to take one type of leave, and then they're going to go take another type of leave. They're going to stack them. So it's the employer is required to provide notice of both types of leave. You can send out the documentation and the requests for FMLA, say, hey, it looks like you're going to be taking leave. Please provide me with this information so I can process the FMLA. If the employee doesn't do that, there's some arguments there that it might be waived. But really, if somebody goes out and they take their FMLA leave, the unpaid leave, and then they decide to take the family leave, there's nothing that we can do to block them from taking that family leave, even if they've already taken the 12 weeks of FMLA. So it's really a good idea for employers to make sure you're promoting family because first off, it's paid. So your employees are probably going to want that. If you have the option between 12 weeks unpaid or 12 weeks paid, most people are probably going to want to take that 12 weeks paid. So you can promote that and you can really encourage them to come in and take that and then start the FMLA leave running through your internal processes.
Thank you, David. I'm hoping you can answer another question about the upcoming deadline and retroactive deductions. Jasmine is asking if we have not paid any premiums to date, will we be penalized when we register?
As long as you register by the 31st and pay the premiums, there's not going to be a penalty, but you can't retroactively deduct. So if you haven't been deducting premiums from your employees, it's the employer's responsibility then to cover those premiums. So the way we look at it is really the premiums for small employers, for those with less than 10, is 0.45%. For large employers, it's 0.9%. And the employer can deduct 0.45% from the wages to cover those premiums. But that's permissive. You can do that. You don't have to. So if an employer doesn't make that deduction, we then make the assumption that the employer will be paying the full premium on behalf of that employee. So your options are really make that deduction at the time the wages are paid or pay the premiums on behalf of the employee. So if you get registered, calculate out those premiums and pay them by the end of this month, there's not going to be any penalties. There's not going to be any late fees. But you can't make a retroactive deduction. If you do, you could end up dealing with some of our friends over at the Division of Labor Standards and Statistics who enforce the wage and hour rules. And their penalties are going to be a little bit stiffer than our late payment penalties. So no retroactive deductions, but you can definitely start making those deductions. And if you plan on making those deductions, start it sooner rather than later.
Thank you, David. I have an anonymous question here. who uses a payroll provider called Rippling. They're asking that their payroll provider has asked, what percent do you as the employer want to deduct? What percent of the employee's share do you elect to pay? The default is 0 and the max is 100%. This employer has 12 employees in Colorado. What percent are they as the employer required to pay?
All right. So more than 10 employees, and it doesn't really matter where they are. We look nationwide for the employee count for this. The premium is 0.9%, and you can deduct up to 0.45% from employees' wages to pay that premium. So that's the employer share is 0.45%. The employee share is 0.45%. So what you're required to pay is 0.45%. What you can optionally pay on behalf of your employees, rather than having them pay it, is 0.45%. So you got to pay 0.9%, but you can deduct half of that from your employee wages.
Thanks, David. Another question here from Carolyn. She has an employee who is now out for health reasons and expected to return in a month. Since she cannot make a claim for benefits yet with FAMLI, what information should she have available when she can apply?
Yeah, so that touches on something broader, and I want to answer that question. But before I do, I just want to note that there are people who have circumstances in their lives right now that would qualify them for benefits, and they're not eligible because benefits aren't available yet. But if those circumstances persist into 2024, then they may be eligible and they can come in and apply. One area where we see this a lot is with the bonding leave, because you're allowed to take up to 12 weeks of leave anytime in the first year after the addition of your child. So if you have a child born next week, you'll be able to, in that first half of 2024, because it's within a year of that birth, take 12 weeks of leave. So in this case, you have somebody who has a serious health condition. If that is still going to be preventing them from being able to work come January, then they're just going to need the same information anybody else would to file a claim, and that's going to be the healthcare certification. Really great idea to talk to your doctor about maybe signing up to be a part of that healthcare provider portal that Cher was talking about, and that makes it really easy. What will happen then is if this person, your employee, goes to the doctor and says, I need to apply for FAMLI, the employee can actually come into our system, say, I'm applying for benefits. Here's the name of my doctor. We'll electronically send the certification to your doctor, who will electronically return it. And that will let our process run really easily. If that's not the case, then there may be some certifications that have to go back and forth and some paper copies being made. But really, she should just know that if there's a serious health condition that's going to impair her ability to work in 2024, she's going to be eligible for up to 12 weeks.
Thanks, David. I have a clarifying question here from Ariana. She's asking, as a self-employed person who has chosen to opt in, is she paying both the employee and the employer side? So can you clarify what's expected of self-employed individuals?
Yeah, and when you say self-employed, I'm assuming that you're a solo, that there's not any other employees out there who work for you. That's normally how we use the term, but we have discovered in recent weeks that there can be some confusion regarding that. So if you don't have any employees, the premium owed is 0.45%, and that's all you have to pay. So you just pay the employee's share, and that's what every employee pays in Colorado. If they work for a larger company, the company has to pay that additional employer share. But for you, it's just going to be 0.45%.
Thanks, David. We're going to ask answer a question that we haven't touched on yet. Patty is asking how the employer should count their employee headcount. Is it based on how many employees we have working in Colorado, or total employees regardless of where they work? We are a Tennessee-based employer. We have more than 10 employees nationwide, but only 2 in Colorado. What percent are we required to contribute per employee? 0.45 or 0.9?
Yeah, so we do a nationwide count for that. And the reason for that is because this distinction between the large and small employers is just that. We want to reduce the financial impact on on small employers, on small businesses. And so there are some companies out there that might have 10,000 employees worldwide, but only have 8 in Colorado. And at that point, they're not a small business. There's some dispute over the definition of small business, but 10,000 employees isn't it. So they get treated as a large employer. And so in this case, if there's more than 10 nationwide, but only 2 in Colorado, you're still going to be considered a large employer and pay the full 0.9%.
Thanks, David. I'm going to hand one over to Evan here to give you some time to catch your breath, David.
Yeah.
We have an anonymous question. Can you explain the job protection after 180 days under family? Is this in place for intermittent leave?
Can you repeat that last part about intermittent leave?
Is this in place for intermittent leave?
Yes. I mean, the entitlement to return to, your same or equivalent position after you've been with an employer for 180 days or more exists regardless of the type of leave that you use.
Thank you, Evan. Let's see here if we can get to a new topic. We've got a lot of counting number of employees. Another counting employee questions. When counting the number of employees, is that based on full-time or part-time, or does that matter at all? Evan, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I'll take that one too. Basically, it doesn't matter. What you do is for 2023 now, for employers that may be registering now, you look at the previous year and you count how many employees were employed by you during 20 or more weeks. And so someone was employed by you if they worked 40 hours, they were employed by you if they worked 1 hour, they were employed by you if they were on vacation all week. So long as they were employed during a week, that counts as one of the 20 weeks, and everybody that hits 20 is counted toward your head count.
Thanks, Evan. I'm going to hand another one back over to David, and this is more than one question from Debbie Harper. She has several questions about the requirements for those employers looking to use a self-insured private plan. The first question is about the separate bank account. Would we be able to hold those in an investment account at Schwab? And if so, could we invest those funds in secure funds, e.g. money market or US treasuries? Let's start there.
We don't have any specific guidance on it. The issue with that is just making sure that, well, let me take a step back here because there's some context missing from this question. This isn't a requirement that applies to employers that self-insure. So if you are not participating in the FAMLI program, you have not purchased a plan from a private insurer and are instead deciding to self-insure, which means that you will be paying out benefits, the employer will be paying out benefits and administering their own program. Again, you have to report that, you have to register, and you have to be approved to do that. But one of the requirements is that you hold any premiums collected from your employees in a separate bank account. And Evan, jump in if I'm wrong on this, but I don't recall enacting any regulations that would prevent the investment of that money. But what you got to do then is make sure that the money that is, if it's generating any type of interest income, that it's still a part of that account. It's still being used for the family purposes. And it's something that should be disclosed in the request for approval of your private plan.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add to that particular question is that this separate account is not only for the employer who is self-insured and has been approved to do so to deposit their employee premiums, but it's also the account from which benefits must be paid. So depending on the flexibility of that account, if it's locked up in a fund and you can't pull money out of it to pay benefits, then that wouldn't be a compliant account.
Yeah, so you want to make sure there's some liquidity in it.
Thanks, guys. And moving on to the second part of these questions, Debbie's asking about the application fee in addition to the bond requirement. She understands that a $500 per year fee will be imposed that must be paid to the state for self-insurers, correct?
Yes.
Go ahead.
The 500 per year, so the $500 fee is your initial application fee. There's then an annual maintenance fee, and that is based, we calculate that independently. So that's not a set rate. So you're going to pay $500 for your application to come in. And then each year, what we're really looking at in terms of the maintenance fee is how much are you in a private plan utilizing family resources. So the major way that's going to come out is if you have a lot of denials of benefits that end up being adjudicated by our hearing officers, you're going to have a higher annual maintenance fee because you're going to be paying for those hearing officers to hear those cases. If you don't have any cases go to the annual or to the hearing officers, and you're not relying on the family program to provide a lot of services, you're going to have a much lower maintenance fee. But that's something that's going to be calculated individually per employer on an annual basis.
Thanks, David. And then a few follow-ups to the self-insured question. Can the employer use the same claim forms that the state requires for applying for benefits? What kind of reporting to the state is required of those self-insured employers once that takes effect?
And so, yeah, you absolutely can use the same forms. I recommend it. Because it does mean that if you have a dispute that comes into our hearing officers, everything's going to look the same way that we're used to. And it's going to make some of that more extensive data reporting just a lot easier for you. So yeah, absolutely don't reinvent the wheel. We've got forms out there. Feel free to use them. And in terms of reporting, there are going to be reporting requirements. The specific details are set out in the rules. Some of that's because we need to make sure that your plan is running the way that it should and is compliant with the statute. Some of it is because we have reporting requirements back to the legislature and we need that data to give them accurate numbers. But the best thing I would say is go through the private plan handbook and take a look at the private plan rules, and they will answer all of those questions about what data is required.
Thanks, David. I am going to switch gears here. Another question from Ariana. Assuming as a self-employed person, your benefits are going to come from the salary you pay yourself, not the gross income to the business. Is that accurate, David?
Evan, that's a choice, right?
Yes, right
One-time
now
choice?
in our right now in our rules, those self-employed individuals would choose between net income or gross income as a basis for their premiums and their benefits, and they would do that at the time of election.
Thank you both. And I'm going to punt this one over to you, but feel free to hand it back to David and Evan for support. Patricia Woods is asking, she already has clients calculating and withdrawing the 0.45% for their employees. However, when their report is filed with FAMLI, the family system is calculating a different amount due to rounding. Do you realize that this affects accounting payroll figures if they don't match? So how can we, what is our rounding recommendation for these scenarios?
Sorry, I was trying to read along with you and kept losing the message as well. The way that there is potential for discrepancy if you're looking obviously at employee level, line by line premium calculations, and then from a system perspective, we're going to sum all of those total subject wages for that given employer. And then identify what that premium is. So there is a possibility that there will be fractions of a cent that may accumulate to cents over the course of a quarter, because you're pulling wages, or excuse me, withholding wages per paycheck cycle. So I think we do recognize that there can be a discrepancy in the system when you're looking at, weekly, biweekly over biweekly versus a total value at the end or total amount at the end of the quarter. As far as rounding, or am I going off the rails here, Jessica? You kind of looked up a little. Am I going off topic?
You're good. I was just going to mention or have you mentioned the 50-cent buffer that's in the system?
So in the portal, if you're completing your wage reports in the portal, historically there was a limitation in the system where if our system calculated $1.50 for the total withholding amount, that was allowable due to like what David was talking about earlier, the 0.45 of the employee contribution, and your calculations were $1.51, the system would recognize that as being over the 0.45 employee with total withholding amount allowed. That has been modified in the system, so there is a buffer in the portal where it can sway up to 50 cents. So if your calculations were $1.51, and FAMLI calculated $1.50 for some reason, or $1.50 and some additional integers, it's no longer an issue at this point.
Thanks, Anne. I have another question for you specifically about wage reporting files. On the wage report field, when you're creating a CSV file, the field gross wages this quarter, the template states individuals pre-tax earning for the quarter. Is that what report on the W-2 under federal or state, or is this unemployment or family gross?
I'm actually I'm gonna refer this back to Evan or David to talk about exact definitions of gross wages.
I'm sorry, I was typing an answer to another question. So if you can rope me in real quick, I'll try to be helpful.
All good. The question is, when they're filing their wage reports on the CSV template, it says individuals pre-tax earning for the quarter as a description for gross wages this quarter. Is that to report on the W-2 under federal or state, or is this the unemployment or family gross?
I think it's the former. That's the only reason we're collecting right now that gross wage figure is so that we can monitor the different shares of the 0.45%. The actual the subject wages, I believe, is what it's called in the system, is the actual amount that's defined by the regs, which currently links the family definition of wages to the unemployment definition of wages.
Thank you, Evan. I'm trying to find a new topic here. We have one here from Christopher about taxable income. If an employer were to cover the employee share of the family premium, would that be non-taxable income? According to the IRS, such a benefit would be considered taxable. Can you explain why that is not taxable if an employer were to cover the employee's share?
So when we're talking about taxation, we're talking about both the IRS and the Colorado Department of Revenue. On a lot of these issues, when we say that the employer paying that share of the premiums is non-taxable, that's guidance that we've gotten from the Colorado Department of Revenue. So it's not taxable as under state income tax rules. For IRS, we don't have any particular guidance. We've asked the IRS for additional guidance and we haven't gotten it. So when we say non-taxable, we need for state income tax purposes, but we definitely suggest talking to a tax professional with regard to the tax obligations for the IRS.
Thanks, David. We are just about out of time. I think we can take one or two more questions. There's a question here from Anil, which we've covered previously, but we can reiterate that. And I think it just went away. But the question was, for expecting mothers who are expecting to give birth this year in 2023, can they take family leave in 2024?
Yeah, and broader answer here, because I've seen a couple questions pop up like this. It's parents who can take leave, and we do occasionally get that specific question. It's gender neutral, so it's not just maternity leave, it's not just mothers, it's parents who can take bonding leave because of a birth, an adoption, or a foster placement. So those are the circumstances. So it's available for really anybody who is welcoming a new child into their family. We don't have a specific date for when the benefit system will be open, but we do anticipate that it'll be available at some point before the end of the year for people to at least put their claims in. They likely won't be resolved until the beginning of January, and there definitely wouldn't be any benefits paid until the beginning of January. But we should be accepting those claims sometime toward the end of the year. And so that's not just for the bonding leaves, that's for everybody. There can be circumstances where somebody knows they're going to have a surgery and they want to get their paperwork done before that happens. And so if that's coming up at the end of the year, you know, you're in December and you're scheduling a surgery at the end of January, we're hoping to have that system up and available. The best thing to do at this point is sign up for that newsletter. I guarantee you it will be in the newsletter in very, very big letters when that system is available. We're going to be very, very proud of that moment, and we're going to let everybody know. I don't have a specific date yet, but it's going to be as soon as we can to let people start filing those claims.
Thank you, David. It looks like we just have 2 minutes left. We're gonna answer one more question. And Anne, you might be able to answer this from a tech perspective, but Evan and David, in terms of the reasons for employers who can opt out or change their participation status. Someone is asking, if you submitted a report but then decided to opt out, what happens to the report that was already filed?
I kept looking at that question and trying to debate how to respond to it. I think it's all circumstantial. I'm making an assumption opt out means either moving to a private plan or identifying that you should no longer be participating in family. You recognize you don't have Colorado workers, things of that nature. So depending on the situation and scenario, it may warrant that you still need to make a payment, but without going into the specifics, I wasn't comfortable answering that on the chat because I'm like, oh, I hemmed and hawed a little bit there. So I think contact the contact center to talk through your specific situation would be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Anne. If David and or Evan have anything else to add, I'll give you a few more moments. Otherwise, we'll hand it over to Cher to wrap us up.
No, call the contact center because there are a lot of variables there that could change the answer, and we want to get you the right information for you.
Perfect. Thanks, David, Evan, and Jessica, and all of the great family folks on the call today. Couple quick items. Our next webinar is Tuesday, June 27th at 11 a.m. A recording of today's webinar will be sent to all registered participants and posted on our website at family.colorado.gov. Those are real people answering the phones in our contact center. So please, we do encourage you to utilize the call center, even over sending us an email, because you will receive a quicker response to your question. I did want to circle back before we close. We did have a question that I think someone answered with regard to how do employers notify their employees of the availability of this benefit? It is part of the required workplace postings that are overseen by the department. So that would include minimum wage, workers' comp, and what have you. However, just like our outreach to Colorado employers over the last year, we expect to have also a very broad marketing and outreach campaign to Coloradans who may be interested in the leave program or have a need to apply for benefits. So our communications team has put together a plan. We'll really start to be promoting this quarters 3 and 4 of this year for the go live of the benefit payments in January. So please keep an eye out for statewide broadcast, TV, radio, digital, social activity toward the end of this year. We certainly do want Coloradans to be made aware of this benefit that will become available next year. So with that, thanks to all of our participants and our panelists, and hope to see you all soon. Thanks again so much for joining us today. Have a great day.